G'day and thanks for joining us for another Australia Talks. I'm DK and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host Ardeet. Today is Thursday, the 11th of June, 2026, and our topics this week are Australian defence relies on its neighbours. Could the Solomon Islands be the next alliance member? And driverless cars are heading down under. All the things that you need to know. Of course, we've got our Two Ticks Town Talk, and then we'll jump into This Week in Australian History and finish off, as always, with the 4X Bottle Top Trivia. This week's trivia is Victorian-themed. We'll find out how well Ardeet knows his current abiding state. I was going to say native state, but that's not quite true. No. But before we get into all of that, let's catch up on the last week. Hello, how are you doing?
G'day, DK. Going well. Had a great walk in some local sort of farmland and bush a couple of days ago. It was just one of those ones where it was, like movie perfect weather. Pretty much had the place to myself most of the time. Past a farm where the cows were just about to be fed and they were like cavorting across the paddock after the tractor like bloody puppies. They were so happy, and then they like pushing each other out of the way trying to get a feed. Had my binoculars, did some bird watching, took the drone out and got a couple of good pictures. That was good fun, and in fact had a nice walk this morning and delicious breakfast with Mrs. Ardeet. So it was another good day today. And then tomorrow we're doing our CPR, the refresher course. So the mates of the podcast will probably remember that we did the full course last year, and each year you do a refresher course on the CPR bit. And I'm not sure whether it's every second year you do a refresher on the other. I can't, I suppose, worry about that next year. But yeah, so it's good. So we're doing that in the morning, which will be good because, look, it'd be one of those. It's one of those things. Whilst I sort of know it and would get into the swing of it, if you just sort of, jumped out of a corner and said, "Quick, tell me tell me everything," I'd probably struggle a little bit. So it'll be good to get part of that muscle memory happening.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a good plan. A lot of people go and do them. Like myself, I haven't done a first aid course now in it's been a while, probably 15 years.
Yeah,
and these things. Oh, no, probably not. Actually, I tell a lie. It would have been 2015 was the last time I did one. So that's still 11 years ago now. Yeah. But yeah, little things change. It's broadly the same every time I've sort of done one, but there's always little things. But also, it's just that good refresher, just to be like, oh, that's right. This is the specific order, and don't forget to do this. And there's always a couple of little things that change, but yeah, no, it's good to get a refresher for sure.
Yeah, well, that's what we figure. So sort of keep that knowledge up. So yeah, it's been a nice cruisy week. What about you? How's your week been?
It's been busy. I've been here, there, and everywhere. I've been so busy these last few months. I've got lots on my plate, but you'll probably notice my voice is still really husky. I don't know why. I just, whatever this sickness was I had a couple of weeks ago, I just can't seem to really fully shake it, which is quite frustrating. But
so you're feeling crap, or you just sort of got some of these symptoms still?
Just like a little low energy, but broadly like I'm fine. But I've just got this husky voice, and it particularly gets worse in the afternoons into the evenings. Even if I haven't been doing a lot of talking, it just seems to sort of get, as the sun goes down, I start to lose my voice, and particularly by the evening, by the time I'm going to bed, it's quite bad. And then in the morning, it's better, but it's still quite husky. So, but everyone I know that's had this illness, which I admit I gave to a few people, they're all sort of the same. So I'm not really sure exactly what's going on. But
have you looked it up?
No. My curiosity has not been that
Hasn't extended that far.
No, it hasn't extended that far.
Huh.
Yeah. But anyway, other than that, we've just been busy. It's been cool, and but we've had some beautiful weather lately, like beautiful sunny days. I actually quite like this time of year where we get this sort of Queensland winter where it's cool, but during the day it's quite warm. Still certainly shorts weather. You might have a jumper on or one close by, but we've got clear blue skies. It's lovely in the sun, low humidity, but then in the evenings it cools down. But I'm really enjoying the days at the moment, and I too actually went for a walk through some local farmland and was looking at the cows and everything like that. My dog very much doesn't like cows. She's not quite sure what to make of them. But one of the younger ones, which I was actually I was surprised to see a calf this time of year. They don't generally calf this late in the year, but there was a calf there that very much kind of wanted to play and was sort of running around, but my dog was very confused by it, going, "What the hell? Oh, don't worry, Dad, I'll protect you from this beast." But cows are very cute. And they taste delicious, which is...
I was going to say,
excellent.
I like cows in several ways, but yeah.
That's right. Right.
But they are funny. And calves can be funny too, because they're still, I mean, they're obviously a small version of the big thing, but a calf is still a big animal. You know, I wouldn't like to have a calf run into me at even half speed.
Oh, definitely not. It'll mess you up something fierce. Cows kill a lot of people every year.
Yeah.
You know? And I think people forget about that. And most of the time it is like getting crushed in stockyards and things like that. But yeah, they are dangerous. They're very big, and I think they forget how big they are, or maybe they're not really aware of it. They're not exactly known for their high intelligence. So. All right, let's get stuck into it. Australian defence relies on its neighbours. Could the Solomon Islands be the next alliance member? The Solomon Islands has a new Prime Minister, and he's made a clear pivot towards Australia, agreeing to kickstart negotiations on a comprehensive treaty with Canberra and promising to review the Pacific nation's conscientious security agreement with China. We've spoken about this agreement, this contentious agreement, a couple of times over the last few years with their pivot towards China and how distressing that has been in Canberra and further around the country. Thankfully, though, their new Prime Minister, Matthew Whale, declared he wanted to reset the relationship with Australia after sitting down for talks with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in Parliament House this last week. The Solomon Islands has been on the front line of strategic competition between Australia and China in the Pacific ever since it signed a sweeping pact with China back in 2022. Mr. Whale had been a fierce critic of that pact when it was signed, but has softened his tone in the last few years. He told journalists in Canberra he would review the agreement now he was in power, although it was not clear how formal or informal that process would be. In the joint statement, Mr. Whale and Mr. Albanese also reaffirmed that the Pacific peace and security is best led and handled by the Pacific. It is language often used by Australia as part of its push to curb China's security ambitions, let's call them, in the region. The two prime ministers said officials from both countries would now begin negotiations on a comprehensive new strategic treaty between the two countries, which would bring, quote, transformational change in the relationship and see a significant enhancement in the bilateral development assistance partnership between the two countries, end quote. You can read into that as much or as little as you want, but it does sound like there's something big in the works. Meanwhile, in sunny Queensland, handshakes, backslaps, and rugby banter were part of the annual catch-up between Prime Ministers Anthony Albanese and New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon at Noosa. Beautiful part of the world. Global volatility and economic turbulence have dominated the annual talks between the leaders of the two countries over the last few years, and again this year as well. Aside from taking cheeky jabs at each other, the leaders acknowledged that the most pressing issue for both countries right now was the volatile and changing world. Mr. Albanese noted that the friendship between Australia and New Zealand could only help the countries face those growing challenges. Mr. Albanese said, quote, "I think there's a new element, which is that we're living in a world which is really volatile, where there is a great deal of turbulence, and some of the old certainties that commanded global trade and global activity have disappeared," end quote. You can read into that as much or as little as you want as well. Neither leader specifically named China in their press conference, but there are ongoing concerns about the Chinese expanding influence in the region. Australia has already struck a host of strategic agreements in the Pacific nations in the last few years, including a treaty with Papua New Guinea and Indonesia, and sweeping pacts with Tuvalu and Nauru as well. Some of those agreements have effectively given Australia veto rights over security decisions and limited Chinese investment in critical infrastructure in those nations as well. So, all in all, this government is working pretty much overtime on foreign diplomacy to ensure that the Pacific is secure. How do you feel about this, particularly as this is kind of like an ongoing trend, something we've talked about a number of times? Do you feel there's a point where this is just Australia throwing its weight around and kind of dominating its partners? There's been a bit of talk about that through the traps.
Yeah. Look, I'll answer that first. I suppose we are a bit of a heavyweight in the region. If you're talking economy size, relations with the US, we've sort of got and the UK, and that we've got sort of some big fellas on our side from that point of view. But in terms of just the region, just size, like pure geographic size, that does mean something when you sort of look at the map. Yeah, what it means more than that, is sort of debatable. But there's a psychology related to that. Certainly, population-wise, we don't really sort of have a huge amount of impact. You've got something like Indonesia. That's with their population and their economy. That makes they're a big player as well. Which is why when we're talking, I can't remember how many weeks ago about getting a bit of better relationships with, or improving relationships with Indonesia, that we viewed that as a positive. So look, I suppose in some way we are throwing our weight around a little bit, but I think it is required. And look, I like what Albo and Penny Wong, being the foreign minister, I like what they're doing with foreign relations. It's a podcast. No secret how I feel about a whole lot of things with governments. But in terms of doing their job on this part of the world and their portfolio, I give them a very high marks for foreign relations. What the end results will be, I don't know. There's often a lot of show with these things, and a lot of fine words. And you read out one statement there, which I can't repeat because it was sort of had that crafted by committee feel to it.
Yeah, it very much. Well, it's one of those legalese type phrases. Would you like me to repeat it for you?
Yeah. Throw it back in, because when you said that, I think, well, buck me, that's a mouthful. So yeah, throw it back out.
Transformational change in the relationship and see a significant enhancement of the bilateral development assistance partnership between the two countries.
Oh, God, they would have gone through a whole whiteboard pen just getting that one out there. Bloody hell. So, but yeah, as you said, you read down into it, and that is positive. But as I said, a lot of show, but at the heart of it, it's also there's a lot that matters, and we are in volatile times. We do have, we've got good relations with the US, but those relationships are changing internationally as the US looks to their own issues. China's obviously, the CCP is obviously something that we have to be realistic about and contend with, and we're sharing a backyard there with them, so it's incumbent upon us really to take local responsibility. And I think that's one of the things that I've appreciated with what's coming out of these talks. There's a recognition of, whilst we might have these relations with sort of bigger powers outside this immediate sphere and neighbourhood, within this neighbourhood, I'm not talking basic Oceania, we do have to take our own responsibility to it. And that's, I think it's, without saying too wanky about it, it is the duty of the government to ensure that they're doing that for the citizens in that area. So, this is one of the areas that, you typically hear I don't put a lot of criticism on, because I can see the requirements on there. And I do like the idea of saying, no, look, we'll ask you for help if we need it. We'd like to know that you've got our back, like we're talking to the US and UK, but there has to be the ability to say, if we're here on our own, we've got a fighting chance. So a big part of that is the relationships we have with our neighbours, and so far that seems to be going well. And look, it is fun too. I think New Zealand and Australia are so close culturally that I do enjoy that bit of shit stirring between the two nations, and there's always that friendly jabbing. It's almost like brother, sister, or family relationship. When push comes to shove, we heavily stand side by side with New Zealand. So that is good to keep those relationships there, and it does amuse me having a go at each other. But that is important. So look, I like how it's going. I do like what we're doing with our weight, but I also do think it's an incredibly important aspect and duty of the governments, regardless of which side they are. To me, this is something that doesn't have any real room for partisanship, because it's something that transcends just a mere election. We're talking a multi-generational situation in which relationships have to be established and cemented. So that's how I feel. What do you think about is Australia pushing its weight around, throwing its weight around? Is it doing too much? How do you reckon Albo's going with it, and what's your opinion of the relationships within Oceania?
I think I think people can make the argument that Australia is pushing its weight around. We are hands down the most powerful country in the region, in the South Pacific, by a quite considerable margin. And to people that say that, I say I don't care. Quite frankly, like if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. But at the end of the day, Australian security is, as an Australian, my number one priority, quite frankly. And I think most Aussies would agree that Australian security is the security of the South Pacific. We are not in the business of invading our neighbors. The Solomon Islands has nothing to fear from Australia. Neither does Vanuatu, New Zealand, Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, even as far out as the Cook Islands, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia. None of these countries in our region, and the others that I have missed. Not an extensive list. Don't get offended if I didn't mention your favorite country. But none of them have to fear from Australian expansion from a military, as a military threat. If anything, we are going to help protect you from someone that may want to push you around, particularly our younger and our smaller, less powerful neighbors. There's a lot of Pacific Island nations that, for a number of reasons, just don't have the resources to protect themselves in the way that we do. And I think it's kind of... I would like Australia to be seen as more like the guardian of the Pacific, more than, say, like a conqueror of the Pacific, because we're not here to conquer the Pacific, and I don't think that's the way it should be framed. But I have seen people suggest things like that. I think this is really important for our security. The Solomon Islands is not that far from, when I say it's not that far, we're talking, it's nearly, I think it's like 1,700 or 1,800 kilometers from like the nearest mainland point, which is for Americans is 1,000 miles, give or take. So there is quite a distance there, but very much like our security in World War II, a lot of battles were fought in the Solomon Islands. The Battle of the Coral Sea is very, very famous because Australian security does rely on those islands not being used against us, basically. They can be the staging area for a lot of trouble heading our direction. And so everybody knows this. China knows this. That's why they were very much very interested in getting fleet basing rights and critical infrastructure built and all of those sorts of things. So I do think Australia has kind of rested on our laurels for too long. The peace dividend at the end of the Cold War, we all just kind of took a deep breath and were kind of like, conflict's over. No one needs to worry anymore. And I think we've misunderstood some of the rising players in the world. And I think now we're starting to understand that and going, oh, we need to like seriously change what we're doing. But it's kind of come a little bit too late. I'm glad that things now seem to be changing. But I don't want to count our chickens before they hatch, because there is a possibility that there might be Chinese warships based in the Solomon Islands, which is going to be a particularly big thorn in our side, because we're going to have to maintain a fleet presence to counter that at all times, essentially. So the Navy base in Cairns might have to be expanded. There might have to be major fleet units have to be repositioned. We might have to have serious conversations with Papua New Guinea about moving some assets out of Port Moresby or elsewhere. And I'm sort of concerned, as Bougainville is looking to become the world's newest country, there is a concern there about how likely it is that they may also decide, the Chinese might walk in with a very big checkbook and go, well, you're a small new country and we're happy to give you some money and we're happy to get you up on your feet and da-da-da-da. But as we know, a lot of the time the Chinese investment comes with a lot of strings attached. Or they want to take ownership of mining leases and stuff like that. And look, I'm not going to pretend that the Western world has been super
pure as the
good.
driven snow in that respect.
Yeah, like let's be honest, there's some problems with what we've done in the past as well. Let's not let's not sugarcoat that. But I do think, generally speaking, ideologically, I think we're more likely to try and help as much as we want it to benefit all parties involved. It's to what level that is maybe the disagreement, but.
And if there's a place that should have a close relationship with Australia, it's somewhere called Bougainville.
Wow. Yes, very much so. There's a lot of Queenslanders that might feel right at home over there. But again, because we see it repeated time and time again. Oh, Australia has nothing to fear about from China. They're so far away. Well, they're not if they've got fleet basing rights in the Solomon Islands. They're not if they have an airbase in Bougainville, right? They really aren't that far. They're certainly within striking range of the top end. And I live in that area, and I don't it's fine for you Victorians and you Tasmanians all the way down the bottom, but for the people up here, we are concerned. It is something that gets talked about a lot, and so I think, again, this government seems very, very keen. And what we don't know, and I'm sure has been happening, is there's probably been significant talks from previous governments as well and those relationships have been built over the years and so on and so forth. So this stuff doesn't often generally just completely come out of the blue. There's a lot of work, and at times these take years and certainly months to years to get these treaties sort of organized and stuff like that. So as much as we're giving the Albanese government a big props for this, a lot of that groundwork was laid by previous LNP governments and stuff like that. So like you said, this is beyond partisanship, and I think it should be celebrated by all sides when these sorts of things come about. So I'm very much in agreement of this, and quite frankly, if anyone says Australia's pushing their weight around, my answer is I don't care. We're going to continue to, because I like to see us as the guardian of the Pacific, to protect all of our cousins and our friends in this region, so that we can maintain the status quo of everyone living peacefully together.
Yeah.
Kumbaya.
I think we have one mind there, DK.
All right, let's move on. It's time now for our Two Ticks Town Talk.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, fair man. I've breathed the mountain air, man.
All right, this week, as I sort of alluded to in Sorrento, which is Sorrento Part 1 last fortnight, I'm come back there, and I'm going to be finishing off our journey to Sorrento in this Part 2. So I'll leave a link in the show notes to Part 1 for those of you who haven't heard it. But here's a quick recap. Sorrento is a seaside town on the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria in Australia, about 95 k's southwest of Melbourne, and it's now a popular holiday and resort destination. So it's got calm beaches on one side, bay beaches, and then surf beaches on the other. It's got a whole lot of historic limestone buildings. There's restaurants, cafes. You can catch the ferry over to Queenscliff, the other peninsula that makes up the entrance to Port Phillip Bay. And population down there's about 2,000. And the area now known as Sorrento is traditionally Boonwurrung country, and the Boonwurrung people occupied the Mornington Peninsula for tens of thousands of years. And the focus of Part 1 was the Sullivan Bay settlement, which was ultimately a temporary settlement that was started in October 1803. Lieutenant Governor David Collins led the first European settlement there, landing at Sullivan's Bay, which is basically where Sorrento is on Port Phillip. They had 450 people, 300 convicts, then Marines, civil officers, free settlers, and families. So the settlement was created preemptively because the British were afraid of the French establishing a colony there after John Murray's 1802 discovery of Port Phillip. So Lieutenant Collins quickly found the site unsuitable. There was like sandy soil, poor timber, scarce fresh water, and there was a difficult entrance to the bay for a commercial port or defence. So basically after 7 months, he pulled the pin on it. He got permission from memory it was Governor King or something up in New South Wales, and then the settlement was moved in 2 parties down to Van Diemen's Land, which is now called Tassie. Now called Tasmania. So that was reinforcing the settlement at the Derwent River, which later became Hobart. About 30 people died at the site and 21 convicts escaped during the occupation. And it's one of those convict escapes that caught my eye enough that I thought, I want to make this a part 2 to share with mates of the podcast. So let's go back to the area that's now Sorrento, was Sullivan Bay back then, and follow the adventures of a bloke called William Buckley. So he was a bit of his background. William Buckley was born around 1776, 1780 in Marton, near Cheshire in England, son of a small farmer. He was reared by his maternal grandfather, who provided schooling and apprenticed him as a bricklayer. Buckley joined the Cheshire militia and later the 4th King's Own Regiment of Foot. And he was a big bloke, 6 foot 6 inches, so they made him the pivot man of the company. And in
6'6" back in that day he's basically a giant, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, it's tall enough as it is, but yeah, back then it was.
Back then, holy moly.
Yeah. And then in 1799 he participated in the campaign in the Netherlands under the Duke of York, Grand Old Duke of York, and was wounded in the right hand. But then in 1802 he was convicted at the Sussex Assize on 2nd of August of knowingly receiving a roll of stolen cloth. Now, he claimed he had been asked by a woman to carry the cloth and he didn't know it was stolen. So showing the compassion that they did in those days, they sentenced him to transportation for either life or 14 years, which just some of the sentences just sound absolutely insane.
It is absurd, but you got to remember they've got to pad out the population for these colonies, right? You can't let the French get their grubby little hands on Australia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was probably incentive there. So luckily that never happens anymore.
No, government always tells the truth.
Yeah. Arrived at the Sullivan Bay settlement in Port Phillip, October 1803 aboard HMS Calcutta, as I said, under Lieutenant Governor David Collins. Now, around in 1803, around the 27th of December, during a rainstorm, Buckley escaped with 5 other convicts to avoid relocation to Van Diemen's Land, Tasmania. So they took a kettle, a gun, boots, medical supplies and limited rations. One escapee, Charles Shaw, was shot and captured along with another, and then another bloke, Daniel Allender, later surrendered. So Buckley and 2 mates travelled along the coast of Port Phillip Bay. And just to describe it look, you can look it up on a map, but just for the purpose of this, there's a big bay, and where you think of Melbourne in Australia down in Victoria, it's at the top of the bay, and there's 2... I suppose like 2 sideburns that come under the chin with a little entrance to the bay there, and both of them are peninsulas. So there's the Mornington Peninsula, which is where Buckley escaped from, and then on the other side, all the way around the bay, is the Bellarine Peninsula. So he took off. Where are they? Sorry, just lost my place then. Yep. So they travelled along the coast of Port Phillip Bay. So basically traced it around, went past where present-day Melbourne was, then came down into the You Yangs and then on to Swan Island, which is right down near the entrance to Port Phillip. So they ate like shellfish.
That's a long way to go.
Massive. I'd be pretty impressed with myself if I walked it nowadays.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised at how big a journey it was.
That must have taken weeks, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it wasn't short.
That's like a good probably 3 or 4 hour drive today. Like it's a fair long way.
Yeah, probably good. Be close to 3. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
on roads, and these they're just they're making their own way. so yeah, they're hooking the like shellfish and berries and the couple of rations they had, but they were hungry and dehydrated. And then when they got all the way around to the other side, Swan Island, they could see across the bay. They could see the HMS Calcutta, the ship, because they're very close. It's like tiny heads in the entrance to the bay, so they could see right across there. And the two remaining companions who were really struggling with the situation, they said, "Nah, can't hack it anymore. We're going back." So they took off.
Going back?
Yeah, they're going back. Yeah, good, because they just thought this is too hard. This is just doing our head in. They perished.
Yep.
Yep. I get the impression Buckley was the real sort of winner out of this in terms of picking up new skills. So he had the mindset where he said, "Look, I'd rather be free than return and be sent down to Van Diemen's Land." So he chose to continue alone. He did get pretty crook from starvation and exposure, but got down to Aries Inlet, which is just around that area. There was fresh water there. There was seafood and shelter. So he built a hut near a stream and just foraged along the coast. So eventually he encountered members of the Wadawurrung tribe. They're part of the Kulin Alliance, and their traditional lands included the Bellarine Peninsula and Geelong and surrounding areas. And he first met 3 spear-carrying men at Nuraki, which is Mount Defiance, and they shared some crayfish with him. And later, at a lake or lagoon called Marmot, 2 women and their husbands assisted him after he was found exhausted. But a key factor in his initial acceptance was that he had taken a spear from a burial mound which belonged to a deceased tribal chief named Murrungurk or similar. And the Wadawurrung people believed that Buckley was the reincarnated spirit of this chief returned to life because he had the spear. Yep. So they gave him the name Murrungurk, adopted him into the tribe about a year after his escape. So they did ceremonies of mourning and rejoicing, and he was cared for by the former chief's relatives. So Buckley lived among the Wadawurrung for 32 years. Primarily on the Bellarine Peninsula. Yeah, peninsula near the mouth of Brim Creek. It's called Thompson's Creek, now in the Barwon River. So he learned their language, customs, hunting, fishing, including spearing kangaroo and catching fish and eels, cooking methods, bush survival techniques. He'd hunt game with them, kangaroo, wombat, wallabies, gather yam daisies and seafood. He built and helped them build weirs for better fishing yields and preserved food. He was treated with great affection and respect, and eventually became Ngugarungatai, a person of considerable influence whose his voice mattered in decisions of war and peace. Because he was a revered spirit, though, he was generally barred from participating in tribal wars, although he saw conflicts. He was given a wife, they believe it was a Buninyong woman called Purin Murnim Talawernin. And
sorry, what was that? I didn't quite catch that name.
It was Purin Wernin Talawernin.
Very good.
I deserve that. And reportedly had a daughter. So he lived mainly near the freshwater sources that had access to a whole lot of food. And the tribe he was with appeared to be healthy, low illness. He shared heaps of stories about England around the campfire. He did go off sometimes and live a little bit more solitarily, but he integrated well overall and pretty much forgot a lot of his English while becoming fluent in the local language. But then in July 1835, at Indented Head down in that region, Buckley approached John Batman's Port Phillip Association Party, led by a bloke called John Wedge. So he basically rocked up out of the bush in kangaroo skins, carrying Aboriginal weapons, long hair and tattoos, including WB, his one. Had almost forgotten English, but quickly relearned it because he had overheard plans by some Aboriginal people who wanted to attack these newcomers. So he wanted to stop some violence happening. So he acted as an intermediary. They identified him as a long-lost convict, and he received a pardon then through Lieutenant Governor George Arthur. Yeah. So he worked as an interpreter for Batman at £50 salary and later as a government interpreter. But he sort of had a little bit of a cultural divide. He felt caught between the two of them, that he had divided loyalties, didn't really feel like he had the full trust from both sides. And ironically, he eventually left for Hobart in 1837, so he did actually end up in Van Diemen's Land. So, yeah. So down there, he married a woman, Julia Eagers. She was a widow with a couple of kids, 2 daughters, and he served as assistant storekeeper at the immigrants' home and a gatekeeper at the female factory, and retired on a small pension, £12 from Tasmania, supplemented by £40 annually from Victoria. Then in 1856, in January, he died down in Tassie. He was about 75 or 76, which I think from general debility, but some accounts note that he may have had a carriage accident. And he was left a legacy as the wild white man. And for those, you might possibly guess this, but for those familiar with Aussie slang, his story inspired the phrase Buckley's chance for slim odds. So when you hear that phrase, there's bloody Buckleys of that happening, that's he's
the origin of that.
He's
that's
the origin.
Incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And that was when I was doing the thing on Sullivan's Bay last fortnight. They just sort of had a little thing on here. We had Buckley who escaped, and he was the one with a Buckley. I thought, that's interesting. And then when I looked into it, I thought, no, this got to be a part 2. But yeah, so that's where Buckley's chance comes from. So that's the story of William Buckley, the military man, convict, adopted Aboriginal tribesman, translator, liaison, and storekeeper, whose Australian adventure started on the shores of this week's Two Ticks Town Talk of Sorrento in Victoria.
That's an incredible story. I love this. There's a few of these that we've come across that I wonder, like, if we could ever get like a really high production quality TV show or movie or something like that made about some of these people, because I feel like we've got so many incredible stories to tell. I just have this image of my mind of this absolute massive man stumbling out of the bush, holding this like old chief's spear. If you were those Aboriginal people, you'd be like, yeah, there's something special about this guy, right? He's basically a giant, right? Like, yeah. I do think it's a little bit of a shame, though, that when he lived with them, how long did you say? 32
years.
32 years.
Yeah.
And at the first chance of getting away from them, he was like, "Oh, thank God, I hate these guys." And he left. I
don't think that's fully fair. I think it was he was into it, but it was because he had heard about them. What we don't know is what opportunities was presented before that. But my reading was he had heard the plans to attack. The mob that was with Batman, and thought, no, I want to stop the violence. So, he did leave. You're right on that. I didn't get the impression he was chomping at the bit, because it sounded as though he had a reasonable life and was free. That was one of the things from back there. He sort of thought, well, at least I'm not down in chains in Van Diemen's Land.
Exactly, and then ironically ended up there anyway. I do wonder why. He didn't basically live out the rest of his life with the Aboriginal people, but maybe he felt like he was never fully accepted there or something like that. Yeah. So, look, we don't know. I'm speculating on but the fact is he did leave. He did.
Yes.
Get out of there. So, but wow, what an incredible life. Another one of these incredible life. And I say, Buckley's Chance. I say that all the time. I had no idea where it came from. No. And now I know. What an incredible thing. I'm definitely, next time I say that, I'm going to, whoever I say it to, I'm going to go, do you know where that comes from? Because I do. I've got an incredible story to tell you.
It is good, and it's a fun story as well.
Yeah,
just that escape and that big trip around there. I mean, that's just such a mammoth trip, and then him just saying, "No, I'm not going back. I'm staying here." Getting close to death, and then getting adopted, and just that, like, if he hadn't have picked up the chief's spear, what would have happened? What would have been different? Would have been sort of like, here's this crazy guy,
here's this giant stumbling around in the bush. They probably would have killed him. Probably,
possibly.
I very much think that things would have gone quite differently for him. In that situation. Look, Netflix, if you're listening, call it Buckley's Chance. Make a film, make a short limited series about it. It would be incredible, and I think it would be amazing to see more of these Australian stories out in the world. And Buckley's Chance is such a good name for it as well. Call it that. What an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, let's move on. Driverless cars are heading down under. Autonomous taxis on Australian streets are a reality that is creeping ever closer, with documents reportedly revealing efforts to trial Waymo's autonomous vehicles on New South Wales roads. That's right, breaking news. Waymo, a subsidiary of the tech giant Google, already operates thousands of self-driving taxis across a number of cities in the United States. But it seems that regulatory hurdles are still yet to be overcome, with Waymo's lobbying for a national approach to self-driving vehicle regulation that aligns with its efforts here in Australia. In October last year, Waymo requested a confidential briefing with the Federal Minister for Infrastructure, Catherine King, to share its 2026 plans for Australia. We don't know what was said in that confidential briefing, but in a letter to the minister that was released under a Freedom of Information law, Waymo outlined its ambition to bring the world's most experienced driver to Australia, which is a really wanky way of saying they want to bring driverless taxis here. While much of the letter is redacted, Waymo emphasized its support for a consistent national approach, which, let's be honest, isn't too surprising. If you're going to come into a new market with a new regulatory framework, you'd want to go straight to the top and get it nationwide. That's not a surprise at all. Ordering a Waymo would be just like booking an Uber. You through an app. Once inside the car, passengers have total control over the air conditioning, legroom, music, the whole lot, because, of course, there's no one else in there. The vehicles navigate using advanced cameras, sensors, and artificial intelligence, mapping out their surroundings and responding in real time to everything around them. Of course, we'll have some photos of these vehicles in the show notes. They do look like normal cars with a hell of a lot of stuff bolted to them. However, the technology isn't perfect. Waymo cars have driven into floodwaters. They've driven into oncoming traffic. One quite famously recently blocked an ambulance and some emergency first responders responding to an event. I think it was a mass shooting at the time in America, and the car got all sorts of confused and didn't know what to do. But of course, despite all of these incidences, experts say that autonomous vehicles are safer overall, which makes sense. A lot of collisions in vehicles are low speed, and generally speaking, the injuries are not catastrophic, but they are still hurting people, whereas these cars seem to be much, much safer in those environments, particularly things like parking spaces and a highway and those sorts of things. Waymo itself has global ambitions and is talking with regulators around the world, of course, including Australia. Meanwhile, Tesla last year launched the first version of its full self-driving supervised, in parentheses, software to the Australian market for select hardware-equipped vehicles. And now the company has hinted that its version 14 of the full self-driving, parentheses, supervised, its best and most advanced version so far, could be on its way to Australian customers, according to an email. That email reads, quote, FSD, Full Self-Driving Supervised, Version 14 for hardware for vehicles. It is in its final stages of local development and testing. This release represents a meaningful step forward in the performance and capability, and we want to ensure your experience reflects that from the moment it's available on your vehicle. End quote. So, whether it's a Tesla driving by or a Waymo taxi, you might you might see driverless vehicles zipping around Australian cities before the end of this year, but certainly before the end of next. Ardeet, how do you feel about this? The technology is quite interesting, but there might be some unintended consequences and perhaps some opportunities with driverless vehicle technology. So how do you feel?
It's almost certain there'll be unintended consequences. There always are when we have significant changes, and this is a particularly significant change for Australia, especially when you consider just how big a part of driving is in our culture and way of life. Yeah, not least of all because of the size of the country that we've got. However, that also applies to our cousins over in the US, and so typically you're seeing Waymo in cities, and there's a lot of similarities, obviously in urban settings at the end of the day. In many ways, a city is just another city. I think it's inevitable. I do think it's a good idea. Waymo has shown they have a good track record. It's not perfect. And look, that's one of the I'm trying to think when it was. It would have to be something like, just even thinking where I was living at the time, I think it was about 15 years ago. hearing an interview or reading an article. I can't remember what it was now. It's not super important, but what was important about it was that there was a discussion of self-driving cars, and the thing was, well, how do you make them 100% safe? And the person who was from the industry or involved with developing them said there was a real push to change that paradigm from being 100% safe to safer than humans. And I think they were definitely successful in changing that narrative, swapping it from, well, is it safer than humans? Yes. So that puts it on the winning side of the ledger. But demonstrably, when you look at the statistics, overall, the self-driving cars in, I suppose you would say, an urban subset are way safer than human drivers. So I think they've proved that. They've changed the thinking of a lot of people, and you do see something like Waymos in the US. Cities that have them are just sort of a commonplace thing. They went quickly. It's similar to what we saw with mobile phones and that. I can't remember what that story is, or not that story, but that there's a commentary along the lines of technology just becoming something that was viewed as magical to just commonplace, that it then becomes almost invisible. And they're on the way, in the same way that mobile phones now are essentially invisible because there's nothing magical about them there. Of course, it's a phone, it does the stuff. What else would it do? The same will happen with driverless cars, and it is happening in many ways in some of those US cities. It's sort of like, you just grab a Waymo, it's sort of like, okay, it's driverless. That's just how it is with there. So I think that barrier has been jumped. Of course, there's always bloody regulations. I tend to agree with Waymo on wanting to be setting up federal regulations rather than state by state. I mean, ideologically, I do have a preference for more state power rather than federal power as a principle. However, I can see the sense in that. Now, look, it's going to have impact. Of course, it's going to impact people who are currently driving, and we are seeing this is sort of like the vanguard towards driverless trucks, other forms of transport and delivery. So we are on the cusp of like another significant change for the economy. I remain optimistic overall about these things, but the reality is that it will really heavily impact a lot of people. I don't think there's anything that can be done about it, and I'm certainly not in favour of trying to turn back the time, turn back the clock in some ways. On the Tesla one, the self-driving, you emphasise supervised a number of times there, and just to clarify that, but and I could share your amusement in that, because to clarify for people, basically the car's driving itself, but it has cameras and that monitoring you. So if you can't sort of be on your phone or anything, you've got to be sitting there watching it, which to me is just in the end basically playing lip service, because the reality is, if you're sitting there watching it, the car is going to be braking and doing all that stuff before you've even started to move forward out of your chair or grab the steering wheel or doing what it is that you need to do. The machine is just quicker than a human, and we can be as disappointed in that as we like, but the fact of the matter is a computer and that technology, it'll always beat a human to that on reaction time. Now, I suppose they're talking about things like what you highlighted there there was an instance of where that Waymo was blocking the ambulance. But one of the things I find interesting is this: it's difficult to find a lot of failure stories for a lot of this self-driving stuff because it's clocking up millions and millions of miles collectively with no issue whatsoever. And one of the things that people sometimes forget is everything that one car learns, every other car learns with the next upgrade.
Yes.
And that's the reality of it. And that's why, you see some of these things where, kids are running out in front of these cars and the cars are avoiding them in many ways faster than what a human is. So, look, like it or not, that's the future. I tend to like it conceptually. I do like driving. I would hate to be in the situation where I couldn't have, wasn't able to drive myself. But I would also like to be in the situation where if I'm, say, doing a trip up to Sydney, the idea of being able to be in a car and just like, okay, you take the wheel, I'll just sort of kick back. There's a certain appeal there, and it's something that I think is a new way of life and lifestyle. Once we get over that barrier of saying it doesn't have to be supervised, these cars are good enough, and suddenly you can, take a nap on an 8-hour, 10-hour drive, or catch up on your work, or do whatever activity it is that you want to be doing in the car. Once we get to that way of thinking, I think we're going to see large changes in how people travel, how people do things. We'll see impacts on rail travel. We'll see impacts on aircraft travel. Now, like for me, if I'm going up to Sydney, okay, I like flying up. There's that's sort of hard to beat when I can pull it off, but. To fly up, I also have to drive out to the airport. I have to park. I have to do other things. I have to hire a car when I get up there. It's not just a 1.5 hour trip. There's a whole lot more to it. And if I had a situation where I thought, I can just basically, get up at Sparrows, jump into the car, say tally ho, and then just conk out for a number of hours. That would change how I would do that travel. So yeah, it's an exciting future ahead. So what do you think about these driverless cars? What do you think about the inevitability or non-inevitability of them going in, and how do you think it would fit in with your lifestyle?
There's two big things. I'm very divided on this, and I think there's a big part of me that some of the points you made, I'm very much in favor of. The idea of being able to, so tomorrow I have to be down in Brisbane, which is a few hours drive. It's something we do on a semi-regular basis. And being able to drive several hours or even further afield, where we're going to be like Sydney, Melbourne is a good example, right? A lot of people do that, and that's a good, depending on your route, a good 6 to 8 hour drive. That I think for a lot of people would be kind of game changing, where you can, not now, but like in the future, you can have a bit of a kip, or you can read a book, or you can watch a movie or something like that. It's a bit more like catching the train or flying, where, yeah, it still takes time, but you can claw back some of that time. Maybe you can get some work done or whatever it is, right? I think a lot of people were in favor of that, and I certainly am. I think that's a fantastic sort of consequence of the technology. One thing I am concerned about, though, is I want to say unintended, but it's not really unintended. The idea that we're going to lose a lot of jobs, basically, as a result of this technology. There are a lot of people that work in transport, and it is kind of one of those jobs as well that's quite low down on the bar of skills. It's certainly not unskilled labor, but the vast majority of people are able to do that. It's sort of what I would call like low skilled labor. I'm talking like Uber drivers and taxis and that kind of stuff. Bigger, like heavier trucks and stuff like that are certainly a lot more skilled in their abilities to navigate cities with large loads and stuff like that. And I do think that will come, but I think that will take time to get to that level. I don't think trucking is something we're going to see disappear overnight. But what wouldn't surprise me is there may be something like trucks may be self-driving on the highway, and then they go to like a depot outside the city limits where they pick up a driver, a bit like large ships coming into port where a pilot gets on board and navigates it sort of that last few kilometers. I can see something like that happening as kind of like a transition period until the technology matures to the point where basically we all trust it to carry hazardous goods in a city-like environment where you really can't make a mistake. You know, if you're a fuel truck or transporting hazardous goods or very heavy loads and stuff like that, you really can't make a mistake. And that's what I would call sort of like highly skilled drivers. That's not very few people actually have the licenses to do those sorts of things, and there is quite a high bar of skill to actually be able to do it as well. And they're paid quite good money for that because they should be, quite frankly. But I do wonder about the amount of people that do side gigs, you know, or even are full-time Uber drivers and stuff like that. I caught an Uber the other night after a couple of beers, and I was talking to the guy, and he said to me that that's like he does it on the weekends just for some extra money, basically. That's going to disappear with the introduction of these sorts of things. And I know people will adapt and so on and so forth, but there's going to be a pretty significant disruption. And I think one good thing about Uber when it came along, because I've got a lot of bad opinions about Uber as a company, but I think one good thing about what they did was it kind of allowed people this sort of gig economy that sort of developed where people could be doing short contracted works, but kind of on their own time. And it just gave people more flexibility on how they can earn income and new ways of generating income and things like that. Look, I would love to live in a world where that wasn't necessary, but the reality is we don't live in a world like that. For a lot of people, this is how they're getting by. Times are tough. If we introduce Waymos to every city in Australia or equivalent, you know, we've got Teslas coming online. They're bringing their own taxis and stuff like that as well. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs. And yes, a lot of them aren't full-time work, but for a lot of people, that's side gig money that helps pay the bills or helps buy that new thing or whatever. So I think there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences that are going to ripple throughout the economy. And we're seeing the concentration of wealth in these situations go to these massive companies. Like, let's be honest, Google's one of the biggest companies in the world. They do make some amazing products, but we're just funneling the gig economy income that was going to thousands of Aussies, hundreds of thousands of Aussies, and now just getting funneled into Google. And it's kind of like, there's a big part of me that goes, is that really the sort of thing we want to do? And I do think that's part of the problem and maybe the reluctance for some of these regulators to allow the introduction of these systems. Is it inevitable? Yes. But does that mean they're going to open arms welcome this sort of technology into the country overnight? I don't think so. I don't think this government's going to be the one that's going to really embrace this to the point where we're going to see this rolled out across the whole country overnight. I think it's going to be slow and steady, drip feeding it into, because I think it's going to be such a big disruption that it's going to be a problem. The one upside, so I think there's a huge downside there. The one upside that could kind of counter some of this is that if you own, say, a Tesla or other, like, I'm sure there's going to be other companies that are going to release this level of technology as well. Say you have a car that has this capability of genuine, proper, full self-driving. they, on say like a Friday night, you come home, you go, right, I'm home. The car's just parked in the garage. You know what? I'm going to set it to self-drive taxi mode and it's going to drive off and it's going to basically Uber people around, but I get to sit at home. That would be nice. I think that would be great for a lot of people. And it kind of helps ease that transition. Is it realistic though? I think there's a lot of regulatory kind of issues with that. Is it something I can see happening? Maybe at some point, but I think that'll be a fair way down the track. I don't think it'll happen overnight. And also I think companies like Waymo aren't going to want you to start eating up their market share.
Although what you were talking about there is an idea that has been proposed by Musk as a potential vision for the future.
Exactly. And he's been talking about this, I think, for quite a long time. He's been talking about this full self-driving technology, parentheses, supervised, for a long time. If you have a Tesla car that has full self-driving capability, I think you need to go back and have a look at your contract because you might find that it has been changed and the supervised parentheses has been added in and you didn't sign that contract with that in there, which is a little bit of some sneaky bullshit that's been going on behind the scenes over the last couple of weeks. But anyway, that's off topic. Look, I feel like in years past, I've been quite bullish on this technology and I think it's really good. And yeah, everyone can have a self-driving car. But what I actually foresee happening and why I've kind of changed my mind about this is that I can see people in cities just won't have cars anymore. They'll just get Waymo taxis and stuff like that. And I think the way these companies, and we've seen this in the past, and I know this is a bit pessimistic, but this is just how I see this is going to happen. There's going to be a handful of companies that come in with these big fleets of robo-taxis. They're going to undercut and basically completely destroy the driving industry overnight. So that's your Uber drivers. Uber's probably going to have their own self-driving taxis, though. Like the company will be fine. It's the drivers that are gonna cop it. The taxis will disappear. The Uber drivers will disappear, and we'll have these handful of options of these companies that are basically fighting for the monopoly, essentially. And I think what we'll see is fewer and fewer people buy cars. I think the price of vehicles is going to go up as a result. And
up.
I think so, yeah. I think you'll see we're already starting to see car manufacturers get consolidated into smaller and smaller groups and segments in the market. There are fewer car manufacturers today outside of China. If we take China as the exception here, because they kind of are, we're seeing a lot of the legacy automakers basically get bought out by each other or basically roll into each other. So we've got fewer options. Vehicles are more expensive. I don't think that trend is going to change anytime soon. And I think what's going to end up happening is, well, don't worry, you don't need a car because you can get your $15 Waymo. That's now $20 Waymo, $25 Waymo down to your shops. I just see this where I know this is a bit dystopian, but this is kind of the trend we've been seeing where you don't own anything anymore. And as someone that loves driving, as someone that loves classic cars, I'm a bit of a car guy. I find this future direction that we seem to all be heading in is kind of a bit disheartening, really. There are some upsides, yes, but I see a lot of downsides as well. And the skill of driving, I think, is going to be lost, which I think is a problem. It's something I don't really want to see. Is there going to be a point where you, a human, are not allowed to drive on the road anymore? Because you're quote unquote too dangerous to be on the road with all these robo taxis. And I see the upsides, I do, but I also see that motor culture. There is a whole culture around cars and car enthusiasts. There's actually a bunch of subcultures within it as well. And I think it'd be a real shame to lose some of that. That's meant so much to so many people for so long. and some cars are beautiful. They're works of art and things like that. And it's more than just the looks. It's the sound. It's the smell. It's the way it drives. And I think all of that is going to kind of disappear just because we wanted cheaper taxi rides. Don't get me wrong, the safety factor is a huge part of this, and I think that's really the angle that they're trying to sell this idea on. But the idea that you no longer own a vehicle and you just have to pay Google to get from place to place is kind of crap. I want to use a more stronger word there, but I don't know. I guess I don't want to say I disagree, but like I just can't help but see some very big downsides to this technology. And look, is this going to happen in my lifetime? Probably not. I might be some grumpy old man in my 80s going, I remember when I used to drive my own car. And all the, yeah, righto, Grandpa, shut up and sit down. You know what you're talking about. We all just get robo-taxis now. Maybe I'm a bit of a dinosaur in this way, but I do feel there's a little bit of excitement, but there's a much bigger part of me that goes, I don't know if this is a great idea and the direction we should be going in completely. I know there's a lot of excitement around it. I see it. I get it. But I'm standing at the back of the hall listening to the presentation going, I'm not fully convinced that this is the best way to move forward. So I'm all for lowering road toll deaths. I'm all for getting, streamlining and efficiency of cars moving. And if all the cars can talk to each other, then they can move in a much more faster and more efficient way. And I'm all for all of that. But I love capitalism, right? But the capitalist in me sees this for what it could be. And that kind of bothers me. It bothers me in a way that I don't trust these bastards not to screw this up. Yeah. So, look, I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's some combination. There's some middle ground there that we'll find. Maybe the Waymos just replace all the Ubers and that's kind of it. And we all still have our cars and yada, yada, yada. And that would be the best way to go, I think. But there's a part of me that also goes, I know what these companies are like. I know how aggressively they will like to expand and monopolize industries. So I can't help but think that that's the direction they're trying to go. So, look,
I think urban will be really where the change goes. If you're talking about within your lifetime, I would place a reasonable bet that within 25 years in Melbourne or Sydney, perimeter will be established, and within that perimeter, it's self-driving, networked vehicles only. That there won't be any. There won't be any human driven ones. And
it'll be like big park and rides or something outside the city.
Yep.
Huge parking lots. Yeah.
Yeah, and then without, outside of the city, there'll still be human drivers alike, and then that urban thing will inevitably spread out, and votes will tip to the point where there'll be enough voters who are so used to that's the way things go that they will inevitably say, well, why should anyone be driving anywhere? Surely there'll be some, target zero or wonderful, rubbish on there, but certainly within the dense urbanized parts, they'll almost inevitably go to that. And I reckon I would place a bet that we'll see that in Sydney and Melbourne in 25 years. Wouldn't surprise me if it was less, but I think 25 years, roughly a generation and a bit, is probably a reasonable one.
Yeah, look, and I don't necessarily, I'm being a bit pessimistic. And look, at the end of the day, you're right, that may be a reality, and it may actually work really, really, really well. And there might not be this monopolistic sort of problem that comes with that. It may be fine. And there is one thing that I sort of didn't touch on that could be quite beneficial, and that's like package deliveries and stuff like that could be much, much quicker because you just throw it in a car and it gets to you and says, give us your name and tell us your date of birth, and it's got some basic stuff to just trigger it, and then it unlocks and it delivers it to you, stuff like that. So I think there's definitely some benefits to this technology, absolutely. The idea that Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, like all the capital cities will be kind of like a carless, not carless, but you know what I mean, a driverless society is kind of really foreign to us. But I guess at the same time, that's how things were in the past. If we go back 200 years, cars weren't a thing. Like cars are kind of still quite a new technology in terms of the human scale of time. So maybe we'll kind of revert back to a bit more of a natural way of living with more walking cities and stuff like that. So maybe our societal priorities around transport will shift, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, depending on the direction it heads in. So I think there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of unintended consequences. And look, we're not really going to know until it sort of pans out. I think there's some excitement, but I'm quietly skeptical. Well, he says quietly, broadcasting to thousands of listeners about how he doesn't like it, but I'm watching, but I'm not fully sold. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm quite skeptical at the same time.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. It is time for This Week in Australian History.
Okay, this week in Australian history, we're covering the 5th to the 11th of June. June 5th, 1823, a path through the Liverpool Range, now known as Pandora's Pass, is founded by Alan Cunningham. Travel up around the Hunter Valley, up in New South. 1909, steam trains begin operation in Rockhampton. These crazy new steam trains that they're bringing into the city. It did improve public transport in the growing regional city, but they were replaced by buses in 1939 due in large part to the passengers riding surrounded by steam in a tropical environment. Basically,
Makes it a bit unpleasant.
Oh, yeah. High heat, high humidity. What would you like? Oh, let's surround ourselves by steam.
Delicious. That's just what we want.
1988, Kay Coddy completes the first single-handed non-stop circumnavigation of the world by a woman. June 6th, 1835, Batman's Treaty, the same Batman mentioned in our Tootick's Town talk on Sorrento with William Buckley. Batman's Treaty is created between John Batman and the Wurundjeri elders to secure the land around Port Phillip Bay for the establishment of Melbourne, but it was later declared void by the Governor of New South Wales, Richard Burke. 1859, the colony of Queensland is established by decree of Queen Victoria, separated from New South Wales, became its own self-governing colony.
Yes, very good.
1915, the BHP Steelworks open in Newcastle. 1960, the Returned and Services League of Australia was founded, the RISOL. 1943, butter and household linen are rationed.
I'm surprised it took that long.
Yes.
I would have thought that would have been rationed earlier, considering Australia had been at war for a couple of years at that point.
Yeah. Well, I don't look. Maybe we were lucky enough in Australia that we had enough of a supply that they didn't have to be. But yeah, I agree with you. June 7th in 1494. I've always found this because we've been doing this.
Yeah, this
history.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of an interest. The Treaty of Tordesillas is signed, dividing the world outside of Europe in an exclusive duopoly between the Spanish Empire and the Portuguese Empire. And the longitudes in the treaty just happen to coincide with what we now know as the Western Australian border. So yeah, it was just one of those little quirky things. But also too that hubris of, well, we're the two big empires, let's divide the world. Mind you, no one there at that point could argue with them, unless you wanted to die horribly. Excuse me, I have an objection. Can't him away. 1841, Darlinghurst Jail took in its first prisoners, and it's now the National Art School. That's up in Sydney. It was an historic Sydney jail. 1998, Susie Moroney swims from Mexico to Cuba, covering the longest distance ever swum without flippers in open sea. So it was a remarkable ultra-marathon swim, and I seem to recall her being like they had a cage that they were towing along.
That's right, the shark cage.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember hearing an interview with her where she was talking about how she just got so tired and that she was hallucinating and was seeing monkeys sitting on the
on the cage. I remember this.
Yeah.
Yes. And I always thought when I remember watching this because it was a big deal at the time. And I remember watching videos of it, and I was like, "Why doesn't she just grab onto the cage? Like, if she's that tired, you know?" But like, I'm like a little kid, so I didn't understand quite what she was doing. I was like, "These men are mean. Like, this poor woman's exhausted." But yeah, I remember watching it. Everyone was like fixated on it. It was a big deal at the time. It was all over TV and everything.
Big bloody swim.
Yeah. Massive.
June 8th, 1856, Bounty Day is celebrated each year in Norfolk Island in memory of the arrival of the Pitcairn Islanders, and that's the descendants of the HMS Bounty crew mutineers. 1928, Charles Kingsford Smith completes the first trans-Pacific flight from the United States to Australia in the Southern Cross. 1942, Japanese submarines shell Sydney and Newcastle, and that was part of the Japanese attacks on Australian cities during World War II. 1951, the School of the Air officially opens, and that served a whole lot of remote Australian children, basically education by radio, tuning in. It was obviously got the internet and everything now, but yeah, that was a big advance for education in remote Australia. 1983, the first triplets resulting from an in vitro fertilisation in IVF were born at the Flinders Medical Centre in Adelaide. Australia was one. Say?
You'd be annoyed if you just wanted one. And they're like, surprise, you've got triplets. Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah, that was sort of quite common in the early days, multiple births. It can still happen now, given how it happens, but how it's conducted. But in the early days, there was sort of, I suppose it was a bit cruder. There was more fertilised eggs put in, and, sometimes a number of them would take. But yeah, it's a little bit more streamlined now. But you're right. It was a surprise.
You wanted a baby? You got 3. Here you go.
Yeah, there you go. You're done. Next. 1983 on June 8th, homosexuality is decriminalised in the state of New South Wales. That was the last Australian state to decriminalise it. June 9th, 1803, HMS Investigator arrives in Port Jackson after circumnavigating Australia. And on that voyage, Matthew Flinders charted the coast and Robert Brown made an extensive collection of the flora of Australia. 1838, 28 Indigenous Australians were killed at the infamous Mile Creek massacre, and it led to the conviction and execution of several perpetrators, which was a rare outcome at the time. 1979, 7 people die in a fire on the ghost train at Luna Park, Sydney.
Yes.
Yeah. June 10th in 1770, Captain James Cook's ship HM Bark Endeavour strikes a reef within the Great Barrier Reef. They ended up repairing it and kept exploring, but yeah, that would have been
how different
or a time.
how different things would be potentially if they had run aground and weren't able to save the ship. Yeah. You know, one of those what if scenarios.
Yeah, good point. 1835, Australia's first political party, the Australian Patriotic Association, is founded, and they were advocating for greater self-government in the colonies. 1916, a large majority approves a referendum in New South Wales deciding hotels should close at 6 o'clock, which created the 6 o'clock swill, where basically just people just hooked into as many beers as possible for 6 o'clock. Speaking of unintended consequences.
So Sydney, oh my goodness. They keep doing this sort of crap, don't they?
Yeah.
You've had enough fun.
Yeah, exactly. You'd think they'd learn, but no, just doesn't seem to be the case. 1933, the Australian Women's Weekly magazine is launched by Robert Clyde Packer and his son Frank. That's one of Australia's most popular and enduring magazines. June 11th, 1932, food relief reached its peak in New South Wales with over 400,000 food orders processed in the preceding weeks, and this was during the depths of the Great Depression. And those efforts hit a high in New South Wales as the unemployment soared. 1971, Neville Bonner is sworn into the Australian Senate, and he was the first Aboriginal federal parliamentarian. And he went on to advocate strongly for Aboriginal rights during his Senate career. And then finally, in 1964, the Beatles began their 3-week tour of Australia, and in Adelaide, 300,000 fans turned out to see the band drive in a motorcade from the airport into the city. It was just an outbreak of the Beatlemania for the Fab Four, and it remains one of the largest crowds for any event in Australian history. I mean, there's been a few crowds, but that was a massive one, and I'm suspecting all that excitement and crowds bumped up the beer consumption just a tad that night in the Adelaide pubs. What do you reckon, DK?
Oh, I reckon it probably did. All right, that sound is the 4X bottle top question noise. It's time for trivia, and I actually just cracked a beer as well. So this week we got 3 questions, as we always do. And as I said at the start, this episode's theme is Victoria, the state of Victoria. Most of these are about Melbourne. Two out of 3 are about Melbourne, if I'm honest. But one of them is about Victoria.
Is the answer the first one Melbourne?
No, the answer to none of these is Melbourne. But they are interesting nonetheless. So these kind of go in order of difficulty. So the first question is, the New South Wales-Victorian border largely follows which major Australian river?
That's the Murray.
Yes, the mighty Murray River. If you got that wrong, I would have been very surprised and upset.
But it's always a safe bet anyway. If you ask about any Australian major river, just say the Murray anyway.
That's true.
That's what it's going to be.
Probably, yeah.
Especially over this eastern side.
So, question 2. How many years did Melbourne serve as the capital city of Australia before Canberra took over?
You know what? I didn't even know that.
Ooh.
I didn't know that it was. Well, hang on. Oh, okay. So served.
Yes.
This is that
temporary
federation.
capital.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So it wasn't because all the other colonies said, "Hooray, let's select Melbourne." It was just how it worked out until Canberra. Oh,
That's right.
Gosh, that's a good question. So 1901 would have been when you actually had a capital, because before Federation there wouldn't have been a. Oh,
yes, you're on the right path. You're on the right path.
Yeah, I'm with you now. It's just trying to remember when they got they moved it to Canberra. God, I can't remember whether it's something like a 14-year or a 30-odd. Oh, I'm going to say, well, they did get a move on. I do remember because they had Parliament in the Royal Exhibition. Oh, good question. I'm going to say 27 years.
You were so freaking close. It was 26 years. So I'll give that to you. That is an incredible guess. I would have absolutely freaking no idea. If you asked me this, I probably would have said maybe 10. It was 1901 to 1927. So which is like longer than I would have thought, to be honest.
Well, you heard me. I almost convinced myself it was going to be like a 10 or 11-year thing, but then I thought, well, we're talking government here. So
yeah. That's right. Yes, double it. Yep, well done. Now, this one you either will absolutely know or you'll have no idea. So, but as someone that lives in Melbourne, Melbourne adjacent, I think you should probably know. On which famous Melbourne beach can you find brightly coloured bathing boxes? Well, so and I've got 2 bonus questions for this one as well, because these bathing boxes are kind of interesting to me, because we don't have anything like that up here. So for our international listeners,
there's a couple of. I mean, the answer I'm going to say is Brighton Beach, but there's a couple. Yeah, there's bathing boxes on a few beaches in Melbourne, but Brighton Beach is really sort of famous.
That's
famous for
the one that most people think of. So for our international listeners, or even our Aussies that don't know, because I do feel like this is quite a Victorian thing. They're not really super common elsewhere. I know they are on other beaches around the country, but they are few and far between, and certainly not like Melbourne's ones are. They're quite famous. So along Brighton Beach, there is a number. We'll come to that. What the number of them is one of the bonus questions. There is a number of little huts. I think they're all made out of timber, or at least look like they were made out of timber. Originally, they certainly were. And they do vary in size, and they are brightly coloured, oftentimes with a specific pattern. Like there's ones that are Australian flag design and so on and so forth. And essentially, they're little huts that house your beach stuff, really. And
yes, because you can't live, like there's very strict regulations on them.
Yes. There certainly is. And I'll come to those in a minute for the second bonus question.
Oh God, you've already got my. I'm mentally going. Sorry, finish off your thing on that one. I'll tell you what I'm mentally going through right now.
So the first bonus question, without revealing really any more information, is how many of them are there on Brighton Beach? And I'll give you, before you answer.
Oh no! Don't give me any hint whatsoever. Because
I don't know. I'm not gonna. No hints.
All right.
The second bonus question is, how much will one of them cost you?
Oh, okay. When you said that, because we used to, weren't near Brighton, but we were sort of down the coast. But I do remember taking the dog and walking up there. We try and walk in different places. So that's why I was like, when you were talking about that, when you dropped the hint that was going to be the question, I started mentally retracing that walk and thinking, how many? And I'm going to say 63.
That's not a bad guess. Again, as someone that doesn't live anywhere near there, I wouldn't have guessed anywhere near that high, but you're actually a little bit low. The number is 82.
Okay.
Which is like a fair amount. Like that's quite a lot of these little huts, the little houses.
Yeah.
Well, shouldn't call them houses. Now, 2 of them were listed for sale last year. They don't come up particularly often.
No.
And the price range is
insane. Absolutely freaking insane for when you look at it and you think, so what am I getting? Well, you're getting a little, essentially the size of a really squidgy, like almost about half a container. With a roof, brightly coloured. Sure, you've got the entrance, but you don't get parking. I think you can put power to it. You've got all these restrictions on it. You don't technically own it. And you've just. And sorry, I jumped in there. Finish off your question.
So the question is, two of them were listed for sale last year. The variation in price was significant. So the question is basically, how much do you think you could pick one up for?
Sorry, there was a variation in price between the 2 at Brighton.
Yeah, there were 2 listed for sale last year.
That surprises me.
That was, from what I could see, that was the last time one of them was sold. I may have missed a listing in the last 12 months, but April last year, 2 of them sold. A significant price difference between the 2 of them, which I couldn't really find out why. One was slightly...
you've thrown me for a loop there. I wouldn't have thought there'd be significant... excuse me.
Yeah, significant difference. But one was quite a bit larger than the other. But broadly speaking, when we're talking, we're talking the size difference of 10 square meters. Like these aren't. Yeah. They're very much little huts. They're not huge. So what do you think you could pick one up for?
Well, on the higher end. On the higher end, I'd expect it's going to be between the 700 and 1.2. So I'm going to say on the higher end, it's going to be. I'm going to put my thing at 890. But you have thrown me for a loop on the lowest. If you could have got one for less at Brighton, even a crappy thing, if you could have got one for less than 470, I would be astounded. So that's my guess. 470 at the low end, which is sort of answering your question, what could you get one to? And my guess is the higher end was around about 870. Was I close?
You were basically right on the money in both cases. So one was listed last year. It was one of the first along the row. They're a bit smaller. They're probably 2/3 the size of some of the other ones that are further down. Its original listing price was $390,000. It sold above that price. It was well over 400. I couldn't find an actual figure. They've hidden it, which is weird because It should be public information. But anyway, a larger one was listed and sold for a crisp $1 million.
Wow.
Neither of these have a bathroom. Neither of these have power to them. You cannot live in them. And actually, the one that sold for $1 million is best described as basically like a boat shed. Like it was, it was just empty. It had a very large, like two doors at the front. So you can open up like barn doors. You can open them up, and in the listing was surf skis were placed in there. Which surf skis are pretty big, so I can understand if you're pretty keen surf skier, which admittedly is quite a lot of fun. You might want to store them at the beach. Totally understand that. $1 million though. You got money to burn, mate.
Blows me away every time I hear the price of those.
Truly, and look, they are sort of advertised as, you know, they don't come up for sale very often. It's certainly something like a family heirloom type thing to buy. So part of me does kind of understand the scarcity there, but also, you know, a roof rack's like a couple $100, mate. Put your surf skis.
Yeah.
Surf skis are like famously very light. You know, just whatever. Anyway. I know a lot of things that I would spend $1 million on, and it wouldn't be one of those beach huts, as much as I very, very much enjoy the beach. But anyway, if you own one of them, get in touch with us at australiatalks@proton.me. Tell me why you love it so much and why it's worth so much to you. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us for another Australia Talks. If you have any feedback or suggestions, please get in touch with us on our email at australiatalks@proton.me. We'd also be grateful if you could subscribe and give us an honest review. This helps us out immensely. But the best thing you can do to help the show is to share it with a friend that you think might like it. Otherwise, join us next week for another episode of Australia Talks. As always, thanks for listening, and don't forget to tell your mum I love her.
Thank you, DK.